Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Saturday, January 22nd, 2022, and today I'll be talking about architecture and the paranormal. And I will have a guest, which I will bring on here in a moment. But as always, if you want to find episodes of the podcast or links to social media, or ways to donate, or other ways to contact me, you can find all of that at salcidoparanormal.podbean.com. And that's SALSIDO. And of course, if you want to contact me, that can be about anything related to the show, whether it's comments or questions on episodes, or topic suggestions for future episodes, or experiences, stories of experiences you'd like to share, whether you want to join me here in Discord on a stream for the show, or you want to just write them up and send them in to me so I can share them. And even if they're experiences of those that you know, and they're not really your own experiences, that's fine. It can be done. I can always share the stories without your names, so that's not a problem. So, tonight we're going to be talking about why and how some buildings may become haunted, and not just in relation to events that happen there, but maybe even it might come down to, in some cases, what the buildings are made out of, and or what kind of what the surroundings are made out of, whether it's rocks or whether it's near water. We'll get to all those things. But first, I want to thank my friend of the show, Jay, in New York, for being here and to talk about this. So if you want to go ahead and join in, Jay, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, James. I really appreciate it. I think we could have an interesting conversation about architecture and how things are made and the paranormal that goes around with it, whether it be the location or the water. It always comes back to the water again, doesn't it, when we talk about those things?
It definitely water, even if it's not necessarily water above ground, it can be water underground too, which I find interesting. So yeah.
The amount of water that goes into making those things. I mean, the article that we were kind of bringing it up and talking about it, most of those buildings are stone. Those all used a lot of water to make them. When cut stone, use a lot of water.
Right.
Especially in those bigger stones and things like that. The amount of effort that goes into it too. That's another thing that I was thinking about is that a lot of times you've seen that the old buildings that are haunted or seem to have paranormal activity around them and stuff like that are ones that took a great amount of effort to make. The mansions that we have on our ghost walks and stuff like that here where I'm from is they're all were people that had spent a lot of effort and time and money into building those elaborate buildings with the stone and the plaster work and all of that.
Yeah, and just for reference, in case anyone is interested, we kind of decided to loosely base this episode on an article that I found. It's the 32 most beautiful haunted destinations around the world, and we may touch on that here and there, but that's kind of just a starting point. And yeah, it's really interesting. It does seem to be, it mentions around the world, and I mean that makes sense. There's different kinds of stones, and there's obviously water all around the world. So and it's funny because the reason I'm having Jay on here to talk tonight is because we talk a lot over on another server, excuse me, and we've talked about this before, just in the kind of regular conversation, and that's why we kind of decided, and I decided I wanted to have Jay on here to talk about it and kind of put that on, get it on record, as they say, get a recording just about our thoughts and and all this. So I thought it'd make a good weekend show.
Cool. It'd be fun. Um, I don't know. You have to help me out. I'm kind of lost now, James.
Yeah, no problem. Well,
Yeah.
if you want to talk a little bit, and you can be as vague or as specific as you want to talk about kind of what got you interested in all this, whether it's the paranormal or obviously into building too a little bit, and go from there.
Well, the building, ever since I was a kid, I've been, building. My dad was a firefighter and had a business on the side, and we were always building something on his days off, So I've been building forever. And then just as older and more experienced, I've gotten to the point where I do a lot of historical restorations and that kind of whatnot building now. So I get the opportunity to work on a lot of the really old, cool buildings that, you know, a lot of them have their stories about, the janitor downstairs in the basement that clunks around on the things, or the, person that died in the basement or whatever. All the old buildings seem to have a story about them. The older the building, the more stories, just because, well, crazy things happen. You've got buildings that are a couple hundred years old, bound to have a couple things happen. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, that's interesting. That's very true.
the paranormal aspect of it is kind of along just, I don't know, personal experiences of, yeah, I can see that in that building. I'm not going to go check it out, but I can kind of see those kind of things going on in buildings. You know,
Yeah,
just I know. I mean, I know that we've been in buildings before where they've done the ghost hunters. We talked about the temple and things like that, and they had ghost hunter trips there, and there were absolutely times that were scary. No, the people come in with the EM boxes. I always say that wrong, but you know, you can obviously tell that you're agitating something. Why would you not leave when it kind of making it clear that it wants you to stop messing with it? I think that it's one of those things that it's there and it should be respected. It's with all things.
yeah,
You're not there to agitate.
that's one of my biggest problems with a lot of with a fair number of shows I've seen. They I mean, sometimes they will go when they say they'll go, but then even if they do, sometimes they'll come back right after, and it's like, well, did you really go then? Did you really go away then? If you're just coming back a few minutes later, you know. I mean, but yeah, the respect is the biggest thing, I think, because if you think about it, and I've heard this before, would you do that to a person that's you can see in front of you? Would you go into their house or their where they're staying at and just start yelling at them to turn on that flashlight or move that chair? I mean, what kind of reaction would you expect to get from that? You know?
It just seems like you want to start off on a bad foot right off right
Yeah,
when you get there. You know, it's like I have children, and that's one of the things that I always tell them when they come and they, demand a juice box or something like that. And I was like, no, 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 your approach is all wrong. You want to have a good experience doing something, and you have to start in there with a good experience, which I thought was one of the interesting things about the Ghost Hunter trip that we did was that there were three actually, and each one of them they all began with a prayer. That basically we're not here to harm or agitate you. Come only in peace for learning, kind of thing.
and if you want
And
to
it,
just talk a little bit about that temple you mentioned, again, you don't have to, you can give whatever details you feel
I can.
comfortable.
If you just help me where you want me to go with it, I will. It was a Masonic temple. It was or it was built in 1922. There was some to do amongst the Masons in Binghamton. They split up their groups, and one group moved to the other side of town. Um, they had tunnels in it that went all the way to the river, which was kind of an odd thing that we talked about too. Was that the water that the building channeled all of its water within inside of itself, and then ran it to tunnels to the river. Um, they always say that they build those buildings on a geographic point that it's channel energy from the Earth, or 89.9, 90.1. You look at buildings that the Masons build, they're all slightly askewed and tipped on the compass a certain way.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's interesting.
and then, another thing, as with all buildings, a lot of really crazy things happen there. There was a murder in the basement, which was one of the rooms that the ghost hunters were definitely having their little thing go. You know, some audio came up on the thing because a lot of people don't really, we see on TV, ghost trip works and everything else like that. It's not. It's you don't know you got it until you go home and do all your homework. You have to check your video with your audio, and there's different. Obviously they have several different kinds of audio, and plus the feelings and stuff like people get inside there. But you're not going to know whether or not you got orbs on your video at the same time you got orbs on your cameras, and unless you put those together, so you won't know. I mean, usually it takes them about 3 or 4 months before they get their stuff together to come back.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's
Yeah.
hours of audio and video you have to go through for even just one night of recordings. Because, like you said, usually they're going to have several devices they're recording, so you have to go back and listen to how many ever hours, 3 or 4 or 5 hours. That's not. I mean, that's one device, but then you multiply that by, 5 or 6 or more.
And then doing what you have to do to get them so their time stamps line up, so you can, was that a fire truck going by or a kid throwing a rock at the window, or because that was one of the things that I thought was really odd. That's the first thing that they do when they find something that they think is paranormal activity. They really focus on that particular moments in time, with amongst all the different audio, and the conversation that was going on during the whole thing, and see whether or not they can debunk it on themselves. Was it the people walking around? Was it this? Was it something different? It's like, okay, we don't know anything. We have no reason why we can come up with. And then they usually share that with a different group that does the same thing. And they try. And then it's like, oh, we got something. Yay. But you don't know you got something. If there was a time downstairs in the basement when a third group came around, and they had, I don't know what it's called. It's the box with the 4 or 5 lights on it, that
Yeah,
they basically ask questions to the thing, and the lights would go on and off, and they got to a point where it was, green for yes and red for no, and then it was like, do you want us to leave? Green. Are you mad that we're here? Green. That was like the thing just started going nuts and all kinds of stuff. And then a lot of the groups will have, like, the technical people in a group. Like the last group had, I don't know, 3 or 4 different people in it, and one girl was like a spiritual guide kind of thing, that if she didn't feel comfortable or anything else like that, she would try to lead everyone away, and this is angry or whatever. But in that particular instance that I was talking about, the guy that was in charge of all the machines and everything else like that, he was kind of doing, like you said, egging it on and yelling at it, bombarding it with questions. And the girl was like, I think we should beat it.
yeah,
So, like, kind of like had to say to the guy, it's like, look, everybody else is leaving you downstairs in the basement. It's time to go. Leave the thing alone. Everything else like that. But and then another aspect of it too is that group split up because of that behavior that night at that place. They did find some things that they were looking for. We never got the report because they broke up over it. And actually, my partner and I broke up over it too in the building, because it was there was a lot of stuff going on there. I mean, I can't really say that one visible thing, but other than that, it was mostly sounds and noises. You know, I think the
yeah.
more that you play around with those kind of things, the more power that you're going to give them.
Yeah,
And
especially when
this,
you're feeding it, you're basically being negative towards whatever. Then that could just amplify that feeling and that kind of energy, and then yeah, that's not going to be good. So definitely,
nights that I was there by myself sweeping the floor and stuff like that, and you heard a creepy sound downstairs in the basement like it was coming upstairs, it was time to lock the doors and go home for the night and try again another day, in my personal opinion. You know,
yeah,
I don't want to encounter this thing alone. You know, it's making noise and stuff like that. Maybe it's time to go home anyway. You
yeah,
know, but
yeah, and
you know,
that will come up in stories here and there if you listen to enough or read enough about places that have activity. At once it gets to be dark out or nighttime, people that are in a building, like if it's an old mansion, talk about mansions again, or a hotel or whatever that being used as like an office space now, people will start to notice the change in the air and the feeling of the place, and it's basically like whoever or whatever is there is like, okay, you've been here all day, you've had your time, you know, you can go now. I'd like a little bit of space, and then when they don't do that or when they work late, more stuff happens. you know, and so that makes total sense there that way.
it's almost like you're not giving the sharing time. I'm letting you into the do your thing into the building, and now it's my time to. You're taking my time away from me.
Yeah,
It's my turn.
yeah. I don't care if you own this place. That's just paper. I'm here, and you can't easily get me out. And this is mine before it was yours, possibly. So, yeah, it's
So that was one of the jokes that I always made with people. It's like, well, the place is haunted. What are you going to do? And I was like, well, they've been here longer than me. They'll probably be here long after I'm gone. You
yeah,
know, I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. You know, my house is similar to that too. I don't really put a lot of weight into my house though, just because of that one particular reason. Because the house is an old funeral home. But
right,
you know, don't turn the TV off. They like the TV on. Leave the radio on in the kitchen. You know, it seems that the weird things don't go along as long as you do those things. But then again, I also look at it along the lines is that we're fixing the house, you know, and we're not changing it, and making it into rental property or office space or anything else like that. We're restoring it so it's a nice place once again. And I kind of have that feeling that the ghosts that would be in my house would, you know, obviously be the previous owners, you know, who I would think they would be. And I think they would be happy to see that someone's there doing that kind of a thing, the same way that it was at the temple, you know. When I was there working by myself and not really messing with them or anything else like that, it was kind of like almost a really peaceful feeling of being there
yeah,
because well, I was fixing it, you know, I was keeping it around. This is their building too, and you know, they're sharing it with me and I'm making it a better place. I don't think the ghost would ever mess with someone like that, you know,
right,
or you know, whatever you want to call them, poltergeist or
yep.
whatever.
Yeah, and yeah, that's interesting. Again, I've heard of stories where people, if they do try to change a place too much, that's when the activity can really pick up as well, but maybe not in the way you want. And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if you're right about that they're happy, that you're fixing it up and everything. Even if it does, it's not even a matter of like how long it takes. It's still, you're still fixing it. So that's all they would care about. And especially because we have no idea what time is like for any kind of other beings besides us or besides, physical beings that are here. So I don't think that would matter so much, in that way.
Yeah, I mean, to them, you know, 10 years could be an instant,
Right.
you know, or long and drawn out so far that, you know, who knows what it's like. You know, maybe they enjoy the activity, you know, that something's going on, you know. A lot of times when you work on older people's house and stuff like that, they're living ones, you know, it's almost like they really don't necessarily want you to come over there and actually do something
Mm,
that too talented. It's more like they want the company. And
right.
then, people pass away. And then, sometimes you get really good relationships with those people. And, you go back to the houses for the wakes and the dinners and things like that. And you can feel, you know, the peace, that's there that, maybe they were just fixing it up so their family would have something nice. Or those are usually the people that do stuff like that, and ones that are fixing the places up for their kids and stuff. But you can feel that kind of warm that, you help the person, finish what they wanted to finish before they go, even if most of it was listening to the story and having a cup of coffee, fixing a squeaky step or a loose handrail.
Yeah, it's almost like a kind of, it's almost not the same thing, but I mean, if you think about that, because people know that places, they remain even after, they're there before you get there and they're there after you go. And I think that's, but then you become attached to those places. And so even if maybe that's, you, even if like someone doesn't remain there completely, even if they do pass on and they, their spirit goes to wherever it's supposed to go, I could still wouldn't be surprised if some of their energy would still remain and still give off that feeling in places like that. You know, I don't think it has to always be conscious beings that are there in places. When you just get a feeling like that, I think that can just come from the way people lived in a place while they were alive, and then that just stays on. I mean, it's the same probably for positive as well as negative.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a really negative place, I can see that too. One of the things that just made me think about is that after I'm gone, is there going to be a little piece of my soul floating around in all the places that I've built and fixed and remodeled? Because I've put a lot of time in it. There's some buildings that I've done for years, worked on, lots of effort that was put into it. You're really proud of it when you're done. It looks nice. You know,
Yeah,
are you putting that much energy into it that, your energy it actually becomes part of the building, the blood, sweat, and tears of it all, as they say, does that soak into the soul of the building?
and it
I mean,
it could be. Yeah. Yeah, and that's not even counting whatever the building is made out of. You mentioned something the other day when we were just talking about what buildings are made of in some cases. Not even just the usual, like the larger stones or the concrete or the, but just like down to the finer, the smaller, like thinner materials. You mentioned that there's limestone in all kinds of things.
yeah, you and I were talking about the building materials, and we were talking about how, a lot of the older buildings and stuff like that had a lot of paranormal activity had the giant stonework on it. And that was almost always limestone, because limestone's pretty easy to cut and shape and mold, for the castles or, the Victorian buildings or whatever it is. And then we started, I started thinking about it. You first asked me to come on the show, and I was like, there's limestone in everything. There's limestone in the plaster. There's limestone in the paints. There's in the concrete, the mortars, all of it. We still use it today. I mean, is that a secret? That's just forgotten about. You know, for storing energy in the limestone. It was just one of those things that crossed my mind as we were, when we first started talking about having the show and what buildings are made out of and whether that is. But if limestone would be something that would channel in it, that would be a great one, because it's probably in everybody's building. If you don't have plaster, you have sheetrock, and there's limestone in both of those.
Yeah, I
It's,
thought that
it's how
was
we make it.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because so many places, and it's almost it's makes you go in my mind go in two different directions. In that, does that really explain why there is activity in places? Or, but then if you think about that, if that stuff is that common, then does it really cause any activity? Because you would might think, if it's in so many buildings, that you should possibly have activity in all the buildings.
That's a good way to look at it. You know, the ones that are probably in the more raw material form, you know, the buildings that have the gargoyles or the big cornerstones or, you know, lintels above the doorways and stuff like that. That's probably a better place for that because it would have more of the energy than just, you know, there's not much in the plaster, you know, just a little bit of limestone in there. There's not much in the sheetrock, you know, but
Yeah.
you start adding it into a great big, huge chunk of it. I think that might have something to do, you know, with that thought anyway. You know, if it isn't everything, why isn't it every brand new house that we build is channeling energy? Maybe they are. You know,
Yeah.
we just don't know how to see it.
There's that, and then also I just had another thought is a lot of obviously the castles and buildings like that, they don't have electricity, but you know that nowadays I'm sure 99% of the buildings nowadays do. Maybe it takes a combination of the wires in a home plus that limestone that's in all the stuff that surrounds the wires. I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Lack thereof. You know, the older castles and stuff like that, that they're not running through the limestone, you know, in the buildings, you know, whether it be the outside building materials that they use for the outside, all the wires are inside the walls, you know.
Yeah.
The older castles and stuff like that, those things were on the outside. You know. They didn't have wires in the, you know, buildings that were built, you know, pre what 1920.
Right.
You know, they didn't have wire in them. At best, they had gas pipes.
Huh. Yeah.
You know, we didn't have electricity back then. You know, we did, but not in any way, shape, or form that we do now.
Yeah.
You know, now, when you build a brand new building, there's wires everywhere.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
because so much is required. I mean, even just like I didn't know for a long time that like and I didn't think about it. I just didn't think about it the way you still have to have like most places use like your hot water heaters, like the water that goes through your pipes. In a lot of cases, that's propelled or at least altered by the electricity that powers the some of those devices.
another thing that you just made me think of is that now, with the way that we build buildings and stuff like that, the water, the electric, even the internet cables and the, you know, television cable, phone wires, all of that has to be grounded. They want a 6 foot long copper rod going into the earth to ground all of those things for, you know, I mean, the reason behind it is so you don't get electrocuted if it, you know, ever get you in a situation where you're in water or take the least path, you know,
Mm,
down to the ground, but not through you. But another thing is, though, is all that stuff is grounded now, and you know that puts it back in the earth. You know, so it's a place for the energy to go back into the earth. You know,
interesting.
instead of staying and hanging out, in the running water, all that things.
Yeah, and of course, with that, you go deep enough in the earth, you're gonna find more water and more stone, more minerals. So,
Right. Well, I mean, it might be to just to place that energy back to where it came from.
yeah,
You know,
huh, interesting. Another thing that,
that was an odd
yeah,
twist.
another thing that I didn't think about, and again, well, I mean, we've talked about it, but not on this show, is glass and mirrors. And I know I didn't mention that to you before, but that's just another thing that comes up in so many stories.
But that's crazy because I have a fascination with both of those things. Um, Glass is a liquid,
Mm,
you know, a lot of people, and it's solid state. Glass is a liquid. If you look at really, really old glass that's been sitting vertically for a long time, it's thicker at the bottom than it is at the top because it actually flows down. That's why old windows rattle because the glass flows down to the bottom, and it's thinner at the top and is at the bottom.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and as it gets older, it gets wavier and pitted, and when you look through it, things are distorted. Um, I wish there was some way that I could take a picture of that for you and send that to you, because when you look out the windows of my house, I have a decent view of downtown, and in the bedroom, you look out all the windows of the house, and downtown almost looks like it was a Monet painting because it's so wavy because of the glass, except for that one pane in the bottom, and that's crystal clear. So when the delivery drivers or stuff like that come, and everybody always looks out that one because it's nice and clear. But when you look out the other ones, you don't really. It's almost like there's a veil on the glass. It's so wavy,
Wow.
and it's kind of neat. Yeah, and the mirrors are another thing. I've been in positions where I worked in old houses and stuff like that, and they're broken, old mirrors with gold leaf and mercury on the back of them and stuff like that. And those are creepy mirrors. There's something about it. I have a huge one, and there's just something about. It's almost like a presence in the entire room.
Yeah.
With that mirror.
I believe it. I felt that too.
And it's huge. I mean, it's probably 3 feet wide and probably headed 12-foot way.
And you just don't get that with a lot of modern mirrors. Like I've noticed that. It's probably the older ones that have those chemicals that they used to make it with.
Well, back when mirrors were first made, they were made by alchemists, and a lot of them would take the secret of the backing of their mirror. Like when you look at really old mirrors, a lot of times you'll see around the corners and the edges, and sometimes even in spots in the middle, you'll see where the mercury or gold or silver or whatever it was they used to back them with has flowed out of a spot. And then some of the best ones, like I remember, I didn't work on the building at all, but I was a busboy and bartender at a place called the Hall of Mirrors in Cincinnati, and they had gold and mercury backed mirrors there that when you walked into the room with just a couple of little candle light sconces that they had on, there was a glow in the entire room. Like every square inch of the room was lit because of all the mirrors. And there was just like a feeling in there. And the mirrors are absolutely priceless because the two brothers that made the mirrors were alchemists, and they took the recipe for how to make the backing for the mirror with them to the grave. They never told anyone what it was. And it's a really weird place.
Huh.
I should have looked it up.
I
The Hall of Mirrors at the Omni Hotel in downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. I think it's on Race Street. It's in Netherland Plaza. If anybody can. I do all this on the phone, James.
Oh
I'm
no,
sorry.
it's okay. I feel like at this point we're just the conversation is fine. We can always look up anything after. I hadn't even planned on getting into the whole glass mirror thing. It just kind of popped up as I was thinking along the lines of the different things that go into a house. But there's one other thing, and I was just thinking of it, and I'm not sure how much you know about this, but I wonder what do they do to make the fogged glass, like the kind you put like in windows that are for bathrooms? So
I think it's more of a texture
okay,
they put on it. They're not really smooth.
okay,
Like in the old days, they were rolled. Like you had beads on the back of them or lines on the back of them, so you couldn't really see through it. They the glass had a shape to one side of it,
okay,
so it would distort the light. As far as like the opaqueness or something like that, I don't know. They put something in it, sand or iron or whatever, just a little bit of whatever. The same way they make colored glass. I don't know the exact process, but
okay.
they put a little bit of some other mineral in there. And they were melting the sand, silica, not sand, but same basically, in the molten process of it, because we have green glass and stuff like that all over here too. It's doesn't even let light through it.
Oh wow.
It's big panels for whatever reason. In the Art Deco period, they put all kinds of giant green panels of glass, white, red, black. And it was just, for whatever reason, that's what they used to surface the outside of the bricks with. And asbestos glue and glass. So if you want to get rid of them, it costs a lot of money.
Wow. Okay.
And if you're willing to take those cool pieces of glass, they're really happy to let you take them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's got asbestos on the back of it.
No,
Sorry,
that's
I was going off there on a tangent with my. I love it. I got them in my garage. There's a stack of them. Whenever I pull up one of those panels off of that opaque glass that was on the buildings downtown, they they make its way to my garage, and I clean the asbestos off the back of it.
wow.
One of these days, I'm going to make something cool out of it, coffee table or whatever.
That's neat. Yeah, no, no problem. I just another one of those things I thought of as we were talking. But yeah, so we have the glass that can reflect light in different ways, and then we have the possible generation or of energy from the stones. Um, the only other thing that I know of, I mean, what's really always interested me is wood, the way that you can almost see patterns in the wood that almost appear to make things, even though it's just like lines. I always thought that was interesting about wood.
Yeah, the grain of the wood. Some of the woods have very beautiful grain. You know, the I just that's all part of the tree's life. Each one of those lines is a year of that tree's life. It's just depending on how you cut it, on how you see it. You know,
Wow.
quarter saw, like when you quarter saw wood and stuff like that, you're going across a bunch of it, so you're seeing those lines closely together. I mean, everybody knows about the circles in a tree.
Right.
Each one of those circles is a year of that tree's life. The amount of things that experience, weather-wise, and history-wise and stuff. Just, I don't know. I love the woodworking, James. That's usually what I end up doing on most of the jobs is the woodworking because I've been doing it for a long time and I have talent at it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's amazing that the sounds. Like a lot of times, the sounds that wood makes when you're picking it up and doing it, you can tell it has a richer, deeper tone to it than just the cheaper farmed woods and stuff like that. Like even if you're dealing with just a hunk of pine, a hunk of pine from an old house
Mm.
or a hunk of brand new same size piece of pine, it's more dense and a lot of things that are different about it. Even the way they burn. You know, the older woods seem to burn a lot more than newer woods do. The newer woods are gone in an instant. They burn up right away because they haven't been alive that long.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's with the wood and the way that we build things now is trees are farmed to be harvested in 20 years, 25 maybe. It was back in the day. It was old growth forest. Where generations upon generations were farming the trees in that land. Take this one, that one, leave these ones to grow. Now they plant them like they do corn
Mm.
and come and mow them down every 25 years and plant them again.
Now, this may be something that everybody knows. I'm not sure already, but the when you see like circles, like the not like the rings or the lines, but like just the circles, like the darker circles, is that where branches were at?
Yeah,
Okay.
like you get where a branch come off of it or something like that. The a lot of times, like if you look at wood, you'll see like especially in like the box stores, Home Depot, those things like that. When you look at like a piece of oak or something like that, you'll see where like it's a lot darker on part of the wood within the rings of it, and then the outsides of it are a lighter color, and that's because it's the heartwood and the sapwood. The sapwood is the outer parts of the tree, the heartwood is, the older the tree gets, the more heartwood you get, because the sapwood is usually only a couple inches thick. But the heartwood is what you want to build out of.
Okay.
If you look at old homes and stuff like that, the framing and stuff like that was built out of heartwood. It would be the upper parts of the trees and stuff like that where all the branches came out of it and the knots. And then the lower parts of the trees would be used to make the furniture and trim and that kind of thing, because there wouldn't be knots in it that you'd have to work around.
Okay. Because that's something too that appears in a lot of stories about how people will hear knocking or footsteps on wood, and sometimes they'll even hear that sound if after they've put down carpet or tiles. They'll feel like they can hear. It sounds more like wood than whatever else they put on their floors or their walls. So I just thought that was interesting. I wonder if trees. I mean, we know that that the roots go into the ground. I mean, and everything is made of energy in some way or another. So I wonder if that could lead to things too. The kind of wood that is used in the place could contribute at least a little bit to activity.
I mean, I think it's probably a collage of all those things. We go this way with conversations all the time. It's a little bit of everything that's
Yeah,
involved.
oh, definitely.
The amount of effort that the people put into building their house. One of the ones here, the guy never had he had two wives, both of them died, polio and things like that, and he lived in the mansion basically by himself and his, servants and stuff like that. And he supposedly walks the halls to this day. There's curators that kind of live there and are there all the time. And they do ghost hunting trips there. And some of it might be for show, just to embellish the story to get people to come and, help keep the mansion up. But, there's also the fact that those stories were going on long before, they started doing them. And it's just, I've toured the mansion many times, and just the amount of effort that went in. He was a judge, and his personal study where he would, entertain guests and stuff like that would come for business and stuff like that. The mantelpiece of the fireplace in the room at the time would have been the heat is all gavels. It's small gavels and big gavels. There's gavels that hold up the main mantle, and then there's smaller gavels that hold up the, crown molding around the top of it, around the mirror, which is the Mercury
Interesting.
mirror. It's just the it would have taken someone forever to make that. The amount of effort that picking the wood. I mean, even if the guy says I want it made out of chestnut, you would have to go and find the right pieces of chestnut to carve that. You couldn't have it in it. It would have to be big enough. It would have to be clear enough, not cracked when it was dried. And then you have to make it. And I just look at the amount of effort that goes in. Back to the stones, we were talking about the building that I was working on a lot there when I was working on it, and the whole top of that is limestone. And it's just the amount of effort that had to go into the guys that carved the gargoyles. They weren't gargoyles like you think, but they were, water routing ones. But that would take an unbelievable amount of effort just to make the stone, and then it would take an unbelievable amount of effort to carry it all the way up there.
Yeah.
So the energy that was put forth physically into, harvesting the stone, making the stone, bringing it there, and everything else, that it just seems like a lot of energy. That those are the places that I've noticed that, the article that, we had.
Yeah. I don't think we need to get cover
No,
it
probably,
tonight, but
we're gonna miss it.
yeah. Um,
But I look at that. That was a lot of energy in all of those buildings. There's a couple that probably weren't a lot of energy, but it might have been for the person that was building
right.
it.
Yeah, and I do agree. I think the amount of physical and also just mental energy. I mean, but combined all of that from all the people that make all these places. Matt in the chat here says that when you knock on wood, you're asking for protection um, from the spirits of the tree. So that's like the way to ask them for help, which is really interesting. That is really actually that's even more interesting because so many times you hear about knocking on in places, knocking on wood or on whatever, and people take it as being all negative. But that's a I wonder how widespread that. I wonder how many people way back when knew about that, and maybe it's more of a protection thing. So that's interesting.
Well, maybe that's why I'm so lucky, is because I knock on wood every chance I
Well,
get.
there you go.
You know, just because, well, building is dangerous. You know, or you hope something works out the way that you want it to. You know, yeah, knock on wood, and then everybody does it. You always do it with your left hand 3 times.
Wow,
That's the way we were told. I'm curious as to what Matt thinks about that.
that is interesting, huh?
But yeah, don't do it with your right hand. You always tell people, new guys come in and say something, and it's like, look, dude, knock on wood. And they're like, no, 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 left hand, three
So you're
times.
focusing all that, and you're doing that a certain way. So you're putting more energy towards doing it that way. So who knows how it would, how it would help. And if you're all doing that basically the same way, that has to help. I would think because there's that focus.
That's a really old thing. That's an old thing. That's something I learned when I was young carpenter. You knock on wood. You're praying on something to work right, or oh, I hope this works good. You knock on the piece of wood you're getting ready to put up before you carry it all the way up there.
Interesting.
Just it's funny to find that you're asking for the help of the spirit of the trees.
Yeah, because I think people forget that they're living too. I mean, trees and plants and everything. They're living too. They're a form of life. And so that makes sense in a way. So yeah, very interesting point there. About the wood and the knocking on it being a big deal like that. I mean, I've heard of more of the knock on wood to protect. Well, I guess that is a form of protection, though. When you say, hopefully this goes well, or this will be okay, and then knock on wood, and then you do it. That's in a way that is asking for protection. I just never thought of it that way. That's really interesting, but it makes sense, huh? I guess I need to do a episode on maybe I don't know if I like that word or not, but that's that would be interesting. Yeah,
All those little things like that. Are those superstitions, or like wives' tales?
I think there's like maybe folk remedies or folk. I don't know, some kind of yeah. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that more because now I'm not really sure about that. But definitely worth the episode on just that whole thing sometime. I'll have to add that to my list of topics.
Yeah, it's really cool. Where you go with the little conversations that we have with each other, the importance of having a conversation. It leads you someplace that you would have never gone before.
Yeah.
We stem ideas off of each other.
Well, that's why I love this. I love doing the show. However, and I mean, doing it myself is fine, but it's been so great to have guests on so far. That I know, and then we can talk about different things, and so yeah, I'm really glad that you're able to be here tonight. Thank you for doing this. I think we're gonna bring this one to an end, but it was great. I know we had the article, but I kind of that was more of like a backup, and yeah, thank you for being here. Um,
I really appreciate it, James. I had a great time. That was fun.
well, and then thank you all for being here and listening. The next show will be Monday. More true ghost stories from the web. and we'll go from there. And then 2 weeks, 2 Saturdays from now, actually. As far as I know, as far as I have planned, it will be the 100th episode of the podcast. And I'll be doing a special stream that night here in my Discord server. And we're going to do kind of a Discord version of Open Lines, where I'll be inviting you all to come on into the conversation with me, probably just one at a time, at least to start with, and just talk about all the paranormal and see where it goes. But until Monday, thank you all, and have a good night. Talk to you on Monday.